Hello and welcome to another episode of TFG Indian Football Roundup. This is going to be a special one. For those of you who have been following Champions League, Europa League on the 10 network, which is now Sony 10 network, you know this man very well. Joe Morrison and his crew of football analysts, they brought a new flavor to what football broadcast was to the Indian audience with their off-the-cuff, authentic, free-flowing banter mixed in with dissecting the game that we got to enjoy for years. And the best part is that they also covered Indian football. Some of those special high-stakes I-League games used to have studio shows on 10 Action, and Joe Morrison was there breaking down the league on TV, which was a rare treat for us back then. And you also remember him from one of the best, if not the best, television Indian football experiences of all time, where he hosted a show from the stands of the Salt Lake Stadium during a Kolkata derby. And what an eventful evening that was. He also hosted the World Cup and the La Liga broadcasts on Facebook. And if I'm to be honest with you, I've been missing his presence in the football shows that I've been watching around Indian and European football in the last couple of years. Unlike many of the experts that we are familiar with, he was one of those rare voices who has been very upfront, very honest, and more importantly, very on point in terms of analyzing the sea change that Indian football has been going through over the last decade. And many of his predictions have started to come true, including what he said about Mohan Bagan in that extremely relevant Mariners video where he ranted about the club and fan culture and history and legacy and identity in a video that I think everybody should check out. It's up there on his new YouTube channel, Foreign Fields. So now that the 8th season of the Indian Super League is just about to begin, I thought it would be a very apt time to catch up with him and take stock of where we have come with Indian football as a whole and what we have learned along the way. Let's jump into the conversation. So, Joe, we have been missing you over here in Indian football. All those pre-match shows that because the matches were starting at 3:30, I remember I used to come back home from school early. I used to bunk the last period just because I didn't want to miss the preview of the match.
Really?
Yeah.
I hope your teachers are not listening to this. You bunked off school. By the way, first of all, I'll say I'm proud of you for doing that, for bunking off the last lesson of the day to watch the football. But I hope the teachers aren't listening.
Yeah, well, the teachers were not that lenient with us. I think our batch was particularly notorious, and they were glad that we just got out of their way. But basically, it's been a while, and you are one of those figures who have been part of this really sea change that we have seen, and over the last couple of decades. And it's just now that I look back at it, how it was and how it is now, there's no way any of us could have seen it coming. Like, did you foresee the rapid change like this coming into Indian football, at least the way it's structured, the way it looks and feels?
Yes, because it couldn't be any worse. So at the time that I first started following Indian football intently was 16 years ago when I was with 10 Sports. And it just couldn't get any worse. You got to remember, even then, many games were not broadcast. Some that were broadcast, the broadcast didn't happen on the day for whatever reason, a technical reason, sometimes a contractual reason, that somebody hadn't been paid so the production crew wouldn't turn up. All these bullshit things would happen. So it could only get better. It had to get better. And one of the biggest things I noticed as well, and we're all guilty of this, myself included, and you probably as well at that time, was you never want to follow your parents, do you? It's always cool to do something different to what your parents love and want and like. So, of course, your parents' generation they've been brought up from the mid-80s when this success began. They've been brought up on a diet of cricket. So when you want to go against your parents, you're not going to follow the same path, are you? So when I was on the streets in India, when I was over there, I would hear more and more chatter amongst the teenagers and the early 20-somethings about how cool it was to follow football. Plus, it was becoming much easier to follow the Premier League, for example. You got to remember there was no Premier League in India broadcast before, I think it was 2000. You might correct me on this, or someone listening might know the exact date. So the leagues were getting easier and easier to watch on mainstream TV. So you put those things together, and I'll tell you a quick little story that was fascinating. A bunch of kids came up to me when I was just on the street in Bombay, this is years ago, and we were chatting away and having a laugh and a joke, and they wanted to get some autographs and whatnot and some photos. And there was one kid who was, let's call him the plump kid in the group. And they were telling me this story about how they all had fake replica shirts of different clubs: Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester United, etc., Barcelona, Real Madrid. But there was one kid, the let's call him the chunky child, who had managed, his uncle had been to visit Old Trafford and had bought him an actual official Manchester United top, and he was wearing it. And he was telling me, he said, as soon as I got this top, I became the cool kid in the group. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Because all of the others had replica shirts, but they were all fake. Whereas this guy, this young lad, had a real official Manchester United top that an uncle of his had brought back from England. So that gave me a kind of a bit more of an understanding of where it was going, especially in the urban youth. I mean, you go into the rural areas and they're not really interested in football that much. It's still more cricket. But in the urban areas, it's exploded. So to answer your question, I'm sorry it's a long answer, but to answer your question, it doesn't surprise me. It could only get better. Something had to change. Something had to be different. And that's kind of what's happened, you know.
It's a bit ironic, that was a real phenomenon that you mentioned, especially with the advent of Premier League. Everybody started watching European football, and it actually exploded. The more internet exposure we got, more access we got, it really grew from there. But
True.
Do you find it a little bit ironic that even though there was this cool generation that was finding football as something that was moving away from cricket, football in India actually copied cricket in the most obvious way possible. Getting into the franchises system and starting with the ISL, which is basically a formula they lifted directly from the Indian Premier League.
Well, yeah, I understand why they did that. They were wrong in doing that. Not entirely wrong, but wrong in the main, because it worked. I mean, the Indian Premier League, the IPL, has been a massive success. So, you can understand why they would want to go and do the same thing. Now, the franchise system is fundamentally flawed. It's an American concept, the franchise system. So what you have to remember is the American sports audience, not just soccer, as they call it over there, but the American sports audience is based entirely on and has grown up with the franchise system. That doesn't mean to say it works when it comes to football, and it doesn't mean to say that it works when it comes to India. I mean, how many clubs have actually, what was the former, was it Delhi Dynamos? Or is that the cricket team? I can never remember. I get these stupid names mixed up. What was the Delhi team that moved to? Are they now Jamshedpur, or are they now Odisha? I mean, look, that's how confusing it is. I can't even remember what that football franchise was in Delhi. They then moved the franchise to another city, and now all of a sudden it's a different franchise. How do you build a fan base? By doing that. The identity is based on the locale, so it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And they've been proved, and I have been proved correct in saying what I said way back at the beginning, which is this, Chiranjit. It's that what was missing in Indian football was a professional, well-organized marketing and match day experience. That's what was missing in the I-League. On top of that, what was also missing was a professional and well-organized broadcast setup. Now, what has been great for the Indian Super League is they've ticked those boxes. They've managed to hugely increase the professionalism and the quality of the broadcast. And they've also upped the standards of the matchday experience and the marketing experience. Why? Because you had IMG behind the whole project. Now, what are IMG? People who don't know IMG are an American marketing and media rights company. That's what they specialize in, not in organizational of football tournaments. So you can understand why that area was such a success. The media, the marketing, the matchday experience and the broadcast. And this area was such a failure, i.e. the on-field experience in we need to have our teams full of finished over the hill, past their sell-by date, retired superstars on massive wages. And it's to the detriment of the national team. The national team is paying the price for that policy. I'm not saying for 1 minute that you shouldn't have a superstar just to up the profile of a team. I agree with that. But to have your team full of foreign players, and we'll come on to this more because I know you're going to ask me the question, that's why the Indian national team is suffering.
Well, okay. A loaded response, and you have really set up the future discussion well. But just looking at the way things have played out, Indian Super League has come and it's changing in a way. We can actually expect the franchisee system to go out of the way by 2025. There's a new roadmap in place. At the same time, in Europe, they were trying to institute something similar in the European Super League. Do you see this as clubs and other stakeholders of the sport just looking at the American system and just they're thinking this is more profitable for them and this is something they want to move towards that?
No, because that's not strictly true. What they were trying to do in the European Super League was not strictly a franchise-based model. What they were trying to do in the European Super League was they were trying to put a structure and a format in place which guaranteed them a certain level of income over a sustained period of time. Because, to be quite frank, UEFA has lost its way. By introducing the Europa League, and then on top of that, what's the other one called? The Conference League or something? The Europa Conference? Oh, I can't even remember the name of it. I mean, this is just dumb ideas. No one should have a right to play European football for prize money. It's not a right. You can't give every single club in Europe the right to enter European competition. It should be the best of the best. Now, that's one argument on one side. The argument on the other side is, okay, but you do want Real Madrid, Barcelona, etc. to be in your European competition every single year. Why? Because they attract the viewers. Why is that important? Because that attracts the revenue and the sponsorship, etc., etc. Now, you've currently got a situation where Barcelona are not in the Champions League spots. So how do you fix that problem? So it's not a franchise system that they were doing. What they were trying to do was they were trying to ring fence themselves and say, we will not be knocked out of this competition. But there's a difference. There's a difference in that, Chiranjit. You're not going to get Real Madrid moving their franchise to another city in Europe. It's not going to be Real Madrid of Milan, which is what happened in Indian football and is what has happened in the American football, in the NFL. The LA Raiders are now the something somewhere, gone to another city.
But you're looking at an extreme example, but ultimately what the franchisee system does is that it takes the club owners as stakeholders and it gives them a certain amount of stakes in the league or control over the league and kind of guarantees them against this threat of relegation or being basically bested in the field, right? So the effect it has on the sport is more or less the same as the franchise system, isn't it?
Yeah, but why have they been pushing for, why have we ended up in this situation with the European Super League conversation? We've ended up in this situation because a bunch of suits in Switzerland are making the dumbest of decisions And all the clubs want, rightly or wrongly, and this is another argument for another day, all they want is they want more of the pie. Why do they want more of the pie? They want more of the pie, Chiranjit, because they are the ones that attract the fans and attract the viewership and attract the eyeballs and attract the sponsorship. So if I'm the star of the show, why should I not have more of the pie? It's as simple as that. Why should UEFA, yes, why should they determine how much I get in revenues when, you know, Manchester United, Real Madrid, Barcelona are the ones that drive the whole show? So I love UFC fighting. Conor McGregor, quite correctly, commands the biggest fees. In fact, he's 4 out of the top 5 pay-per-views ever in the history of UFC. And I think he's 3 out of the top 5 in the history of combat sports. So why should Conor McGregor not ask the authorities and say, hey, I am the show. Why can't I have more of the percentage? Because without me, you don't have the big numbers. You don't have the big eyeballs. It's as simple as that. Now, how they went about it, Chiranjit, well, that was a disaster. That was a farce. That was a mess. That was ill thought through. They didn't think about how they were going about it. That is the beef I have with the European Super League. In concept, I agree with it. The way they went about it, I totally disagree with. So, coming back to the franchise system. The franchise system at the moment in India is unsustainable. That's why I can't think of, you'll correct me here, I'm not sure there is one franchisee, let's call them that, owner, from season 1 of the ISL that's now in season, well, we're going to season 8 now, aren't we?
Yeah, I think Vita Dani of Chennai FC is still there. I think KGSPL is still there. They have had the ATK FC. Now they're doing ATK Mohun Bagan. Another mess. We'll get into that. And I think we've got some of the co-owners of Northeast United have been there from the start.
Although you see what I'm saying? So let's say there's 3 co-owners, for example, in each of these franchises. Not all 3 are exactly the same. The owners are not exactly the same from season 1 to season now. Why? Because they realize, these are smart business people, they realize we cannot make money on this. So how do you fix that? It's a very easy fix. I'm still staggered since first of all, they didn't put the rule in place in season 1. They went on this stupid auction system. Well, that might work in cricket. It doesn't work in football. What they should have done is they should have implemented what they have now done, which is, you know, really pushing the transfer system, because that is the only way that clubs in India can make money. Developing talent, so that helps the national team because it's now in their interests to build an academy and to form junior leagues and junior teams, and to nurture that talent and coach that talent so that the kid that goes in at whatever age, 14, comes out at 18, more valuable, and you can sell him on. Or you can keep him to fire your team to glory. That's the only money that's in India, because the match day ticketing generates peanuts. There's no TV money. It's also peanuts. The sponsorship is peanuts. So the smart business people have got out. It's crazy. It's totally crazy. This is something that if you don't have that American model in place, you would have identified years ago. So the things that have been happening in the Indian Super League over the last couple of years, I totally applauded. Fabulous. But you're making decisions 7 years too late. These things should have been in place 7 seasons ago. On season 1, you should have been allowed 1 marquee player and the rest should have been your local talent. Because just wait until you ask me about the Indian national team when we got into that conversation, Chiranjit, and I'll tell you why the whole thing has been so damaging to the national team.
Okay, absolutely. Just a little bit of a segue before we get into that. If Newcastle United was part of the European Super League founders block, would you be out there protesting or would you be backing the management?
I'd be backing it. I've never protested against the European Super League. I'm a supporter of the European Super League. I think it's a great idea. Now, the format that they were talking about is a mess. It's a disaster. You know, we're going to be 12, was it 15 teams and then 5 others or whatever? No, that doesn't work. And they went off half-baked. The first thing that they should have done is they should have had a headline sponsor and a global headline broadcaster in place before they made one announcement.
DAZN was there. They were offering some massive deal for streaming rights.
There was nothing. They were in talks. They were in talks with Facebook. They were in talks with DAZN. There was no one that had put their money on the table and said, "We will back this. We will become the host broadcaster globally for this competition." No one. They'd been in talks with DAZN. They'd been in talks with Facebook. They'd been in talks with Amazon. They'd been in talks with ESPN and in talks with others, but they didn't have anything. And then the other was the sponsorship. They were saying that was it Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan that promised to back it. They were backing it with loans. Now, who is going around the world at the moment and signing up huge sponsorship agreements with big pockets? Saudi Aramco. They've invested heavily into Formula One as one of their new headline sponsors. So if you'd gone to Saudi Aramco and said, "We want," I'm just picking a number here, but let's say 5 billion for you to be the global sponsor of this new Super League for the next 5 years or 7 years, whatever, they would have said, "Yes, where do we sign?" They had none of that in place. So the European Super League as a concept, from my side, is that I supported it. The organization, the format, having everything ready was an absolute and utter disaster.
Okay, there was rumors at one point that Aramco was actually in talks with Mohan Bagan to acquire the stakes. Nothing happened on that front.
To sponsor it or to own it?
To acquire majority stakes, probably 75% to 80%.
So if I'm a sports business person, why would I do that? I don't get any return from that. I'm better off putting money in to get the shirt sponsorship of Mohan Bagan than I am to actually own Mohan Bagan. Where do I get the return on revenue from, the return on investment from, ROI? I don't make any money off TV. I don't make any money off match day ticket sales. I don't make any money off, tell me where Now, I understand why Manchester City have got involved in Mumbai, because they have built this global network of talent, yeah? So they can move their talent between their clubs from one country to another. So who was the Australian player that went from Melbourne City to England? Was it Aaron Moy? I can't remember.
Yeah, probably.
And he went for the most ridiculous transfer fee, which would never have been sanctioned in normal market conditions. But because he was playing for a Manchester City group club in Australia, and he went to a Manchester City team in England, they were able to transfer him for, I think it was next to nothing. It was a small fee. And then they eventually sold him for a much greater fee. That's where the money is.
Yeah,
why are you not developing young Indian talent? And if you don't think they're good enough for your club, you sell them on for a fee and you make money that way.
Yeah, certain clubs in India are trying that, Lajong and some others. But I think the proposition...
Now they are. They should have been doing that 7 years ago.
Yeah, I think they were doing it from around early 2010s. I think whichever club was from the Northeast or some of the other low budget clubs, whatever they were doing in the I League, they were getting their whole team rated by the richer clubs, in the summer.
But wait a second. When you say, because by the way, this as well as I do, there's some very, very bad player contracts in Indian professional football. So when you say rated, yes, the ISL clubs might be coming in and offering that player double the salary. And of course, he's going to go. But were they paying a transfer fee?
Back then, very little. But
exactly.
It was not, everything was not up and up.
Small transfer fee, because still to this day in the I League, there's many, many players that are on 9-month, 10-month contracts. So it's very easy. If I want to get a player out of an I League contract, I don't have to pay a transfer fee because his contract is so weak. He's only on a 10-month contract. So I can just. It's dead easy to get that player out of that contract.
Yeah, most of the clubs, but the ones who are going with the season by season contract are mostly the richer clubs, and I think Lajong and Wangdo, these clubs that were coming out of the northeast, they had academy time contracts like 5 6 years, and they hopefully got some, and they got a lot from ISL clubs. Once that happened, at least I think I see that as one of the best changes that ISL has brought to the transfer system, is that clubs can actually make money off the transfer fees. But coming back to Indian football, AIFF was actually in a war path with these I League clubs. They were boycotting the Super Cup. They were boycotting whatever tournament the AIFF was coming up with, threatening litigation. All of a sudden, all that has changed, but we are ending up in a space where Indian Super League has the top division status, and I League is sort of melting away at this point.
Mhm.
Was this the conclusion that you would have wanted from the 5 years of turmoil that preceded?
Um, so let's get one thing straight first. I don't care what the top division is called. It can be the Super League, it can be the Mickey Mouse League, it can be the Joe Morrison League. I don't care. It's not important. What is important is that you have a football pyramid. And again, another failure with the ISL was not having promotion and relegation. So, and that is going to, over time, that is going to get better because they will at some point have promotion and relegation. I think they've said, is it in 2 seasons' time or 3 seasons' time or something like that?
Next season, 2022-23, whoever wins I League is supposed to get promoted to ISL.
Right. So, which is great. Yeah, that's fabulous. So a football pyramid is really important. You cannot afford for the I League to melt away, as you put it. That is so important. It's the lifeblood. Now, that's just a phrase. It's the lifeblood of the football ecosystem in India. Now, let's get to the serious stuff. Here's the issue you have if the I League melts away. If, let's say, the I League, just for argument's sake, disappeared tomorrow, it was no longer a professional league. It was an amateur league. Yeah, no one got paid to play. You have, what is it, 11 clubs in the ISL?
ISL has 11 now, yeah.
You have
And
11
13
clubs
in
in the ISL. If you go all the way to the final, you play 21 games. Your top talent for your national team is expected to go and compete with the best in its region in Asia, in the AFC, with 21 professional games under their belt in the course of a calendar year or a football year. That is shocking. It is shockingly bad. Let me put it in perspective, yeah? When the league was finishing in February, if you got knocked out, right, the group stage, and you don't play again until November, that is equivalent to having a serious knee injury, an ACL injury. That much time out of the game, not playing competitive matches. And they wonder why the Indian national team is not performing at the level that they think it should be performing at. The Indian national team should be sub 100, and it should be sub 100 in the rankings regularly, not dipping in and out of 98, 99. It should be there regularly when you go and look at the teams that are sub 100. There are Pacific Islands that are sub 100. So the resources that you've got in India, it's an absolute scandal. And whoever came up with that should be taken out and shot. It's as simple as that. They clearly have no understanding of football, that they think that the I League is not important and should melt away. So the I League, it needs to be there because you have young talent coming through, which aren't going to make it into the ISL yet, because they're still 17, 18. They're just busy learning. And they need game time. The only way a player develops is actual competitive game time. So if you have 11 teams playing 21 games and you have a young player who's, what should we call him, Chiranjit, a bench player, yeah? How is he going to get minutes in an 11-team league playing 21 games? If you go to the final, by the way, how is he going to get minutes, valuable minutes, and exposure to competitive professional men's football? if you don't have an I-League.
Yeah. So I think what they're doing from next season, there will be some adjustment to the calendar, or there will be a new format. Three-legged ISL is being discussed. So we'll probably have about 30 league stage games, plus the playoffs, plus Super Cup if that happens. So some effort is still happening to increase the number of competitive matches in the season. Probably would have happened already if not for the pandemic. But what you pointed out is a legitimate concern that we've had, and I think the 9 month, 10 month contracts that you mentioned, a lot of it started around the time when we had a split season. Remember, ISL was happening in an exclusive window from October to December, and I League was starting from January. So these clubs had no incentive at all to keep the players sitting around for the whole year. They could have just loaned them from ISL teams for from January to May, and that's it. Their season is done. So this kind of the split that happened, do you think that was the beginning, or it had an impact that we're still feeling today in terms of depth of talent, because the entire player pool sort of got divided into two, and because a lot less Indian players were playing in ISL than they were in I League, the structure was making sure that the majority of the professional players, Indian professional players, were only getting to play professionally for 5 months a year. Do you think like that
Less
sort of
than
set?
5 months a year.
Yeah.
Less 5 months a year. Competitive football, less.
So do you think that sort of started the uh, got the snowball rolling, so to speak, that we are seeing now?
Look, my view on the whole thing is very simple, and I get asked this question a lot, or a form of this question on a regular basis, and my answer is the same, and my answer is the same as it was 5 years ago, as it was 10 years ago. Is Indian football progressing? Yes. Is it progressing fast enough? Absolutely not. And why is that important? It's important because there's some real dumb fucks in the organizational structure of Indian football who think that their progress, right, is unmatched around the world. When India is in Indian football and the ISL and the I League and the AIFF are making all of these monumental steps, good steps, by the way, positive steps, in my opinion, such as a proper transfer system, such as increasing the number of games so that you play home and away, and then away and home. So it's like an extra third game for every club to get that 30-game season that you were talking about. Are these all great things? Yes. They are such positive steps forward. My beef is this. It's taken you 8 years to get to this stage, at which time the rest of the world has also moved on by 8 years. So whilst you're patting yourselves on the back, these bloody suits in Delhi are going, great move, It's like you are going forward at the speed of 5 kilometers an hour. The rest of the world is going forward at the speed of 10 kilometers an hour. You are still behind the curve. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the question needs to be not, is Indian football making progress? That's an easy answer. Yes, it is. Is Indian football progressing fast enough? Absolutely not. So what does that mean? You tell me what that means. It means you're going backwards.
Mm.
And
So
by the way, you don't have to take my opinion for that. The FIFA rankings are showing that you're not making progress. That's what they're showing. You're standing still. You've stood still. In fact, you've actually gone backwards a little bit. You've stood still in the 100 to the 110 zone, if you like, of world football for years now.
Yeah. Since progress here is a bit of a comparative thing, because you are always comparing yourself with others, and if others are progressing faster than you, you are actually going behind. Uh, can you give us a couple of examples of other countries that have, maybe they are in the region, maybe they are also making a little bit of progress, and traditionally you would have looked at them as somebody who would be behind India, but they are actually taking over and going ahead?
Bangladesh.
Mm.
Bangladesh has players of Bangladeshi origin. They introduced that, I think it was 2 or 3 seasons ago. Bangladesh, with, by the way, none of the resources that Indian football has, is trying to enhance its domestic league. I wouldn't say it's necessarily been wholly successful, but at least they're trying to do it. They reduced the number of foreigners. You know, they did that ages ago to meet more sort of AFC requirements. There are so many things that are wrong there, but that's just off the top of my head. You know, you can go and look at other countries in the region that you should be comparable to and you should be competing with. And whether it's the ecosystem, whether it's the type of coaches that you're bringing in, you know, there are so many aspects to it. So let's take the foreign quota, for example. Yeah. If you'd said in season 1 of the ISL, right, okay, we're going to have 7 foreigners, but in season 2 it'll be 6, and season 3 it'll be 5, I would have gone, okay, I get that, I understand that. Yeah. It's only, just correct me here because I'm not sure exactly the timing. It's only last season, was it, that they started reducing? Or was it the season before COVID?
Yeah, they've been reducing for a couple of seasons now. But
Right.
this season we have 4 foreigners on the field at one time for the first time in ISL.
Yes. So why? It should have been 4 foreigners on the field 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, after season 3, it should be 4 foreigners on the field.
A lot of emphasis that we saw from FSDL, from ISL, in terms of showcasing Indian football and showcasing ISL as a product was it has to look awesome. It has to look great on TV. It has to seem like we're doing something that's completely above the quality that we have in I-League in general. And I even actually heard certain friendly media outlets comparing ISL to UEFA Champions League in terms of the presentation or the experience, quote unquote.
Clearly, that was made by people who've never been to a Champions League match day experience.
That's possible, but just looking at when a league is showcasing itself as a product and putting the shine ahead of the shoe, basically. Do you think like that's the price we're paying for that? The regression that Indian football has seen, not actually trying to get the sport ahead, get the players ahead, but the product has to look good.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I love that saying, by the way. I'm going to steal that from you, the shine before the shoe. So here's the problem, because maybe in season 1, you've gone round to, let's say, broadcasters, for example, around the world, or potential sponsors or whatever, and said, we've got this amazing product, when actually you haven't. And now, certainly from what I've seen, the quality and standard, in particular of the Indian players on the fields in the Indian Super League and the Super League itself, is very good. It was awful in season 1. It's very, very good now. But here's the problem. You're a busted flush. You've shot your load, for want of a phrase, you know? It's like, so when you go back to those broadcasts and say, we've now got a fabulous product, they just go like, yeah, we've heard your bullshit before. You told us in season 1 you had a fabulous product. And now we just don't believe you. And you cannot con the fans. The fans know the difference between a good player and an awful player. They know the difference. So don't say something is brilliant when it's not. Be honest and say it's not great today, but we're getting better each season. And by reducing the number of foreigners, it forces Indian players to perform at a higher level, because they're not sitting on the bench whilst 7 nearly retired football players take the field. They're actually getting invaluable game time, which then helps the national team. Yeah.
So, just take yourself back to, let's say, 2011 or 2012, and you are there maybe sitting in the Sony 10 studios after a match, before a match, and somebody from AIFF or FSDL comes to you and says, like, we're trying to get the league system better. We're trying to, make it more marketable and create a great product. What do you tell them? Do you suggest that they should, start a new league, or do you suggest they should take I-League forward, put the money and investment into that. New franchises, existing clubs, what do you say?
Well, I think the problem they had with the I-League as it was at that particular time is they'd already rebranded it, hadn't they? So, like, what do? Do you just sort of give it another lick of paint and that fixes everything? No, it doesn't. And look, I know why they've made some of the decisions, in particular the East Bengal and Mohun Bagan. You've got, or you had in the I-League, some very good custodians, such as JSW Group with Bengaluru, very forward-thinking, very smart people. And you had some awful custodians, such as the East Bengal Group. So, who just didn't have a clue. So basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to put together a format whereby everyone is invested in that format and everyone is going to come together in a united way and make it a fabulous product which can be sold and sponsored and marketed, etc. Here's the issue. The issue is there were so many, and there still are, so many individualistic, narrow-minded people involved in I-League football. My interests come first. Take Stadia, for example. This is why they have this criteria to be part of the Indian Super League. What they're trying to do is raise the standards instead of, saying, right, okay, we are going to give you this franchisee money, prize money, whatever the case may be, TV money it might be, etc. And they just put it in their pocket and they don't improve their standards, don't improve their facilities. Yeah. You have too many people wanting to do their own thing in the I-League. That's the problem with the I-League. I've seen it firsthand myself. There's some absolute idiots involved in the ownership of clubs in the I-League. There's some good, honest people as well who, are doing the best that they can with limited resources to be as professional as they can. But there's too many idiots as well who are, we're trying to raise the standards of Indian football. We've got to do this together instead of you just caring about your little, area of the industry and not caring about the whole big picture and getting involved in the whole thing, So to answer your question, what would I have done? I would have gone to the clubs and said, this is where you need the money, and they've got the Reliance money behind them. So you could go and say, do you want to sign up to all of the clubs that are already there? Do you want to sign up to these? If you do, and be part of this, not only revolution, but more importantly, this potential payout, this pot of money could potentially be yours or a piece of it. This is what you have to do for us. Now, I probably would guess, Chiranjit, that they did that and found that there was too much resistance, because the legacy stakeholders of the I-League don't want to change. They don't want to modernize. They don't want to, bring football up to the world standards. And when I say world standards, I'm not talking about building a 1 billion stadium like Tottenham Hotspur. I'm talking about at least the standards of some of the major South American clubs. That's where I always think India should be pitching itself. Whatever the standard is in Latin America, you should be kind of at or around that level, whether it's stadia, facilities, marketing, all of that kind of stuff. Because Latin America is not the best in the world, but it is, not bad. So, and then all of the other things are side issues, such as how many foreigners do you bring into the league? And you just think about all of the millions of dollars that was spent on those superstars in season 1.
Yeah, I always
and
say
how that could be invested in youth talent, because bearing in mind we're now going to season 8, correct? Is it right? Season 8?
Yes.
So we're now 8 years down the line. There is a player who would have been 12 years old that if that young talent had investment at 12 years old in season 1, might now be the superstar for the national team at age 20. But instead, you thought it was a great idea to get all of these players that, was it Freddie Ljungberg that only played 20 minutes or something? Who was the player that was injured for the entire first season?
Freddie Ljungberg, there was Del Piero, there was quite a few. I think Anelka was the shining crown jewel of early ISL
but
signings.
At least Nicholas Anelka played,
Yeah, but
those other guys
he became a coach at one point.
Yeah, and he was coach. But those guys played 30 minutes of an injury-plagued 3 months in season 1. Tell me who thought that was a good idea. Now, yes, but we need their marquee player name to attract the fans. And really, you're telling me that you had all of these. Remember all the bullshit, Churnjit, about the Indian Super League was it the third most watched league in the world, or third most fans or something at stadiums? Like, come
third
on.
most fans.
You're bullshitting. You're taking the piss. By the way, that fact is not a lie, but what they've done is they've twisted the numbers. So it's like, for example, if I play 2 games, right, and I score a goal in each of the games, so I've only scored 2 goals, my goal scoring ratio is 100%.
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm the best striker in the league because I've only played 2 games and I've scored 2 goals? So because you only had at that time, was it 8 teams? You had 8 teams. You were giving away free tickets to school kids to fill the stadiums, yeah? And now you're claiming that you are the third most watched fans in world football, when the stadiums that are packed to almost capacity in England, in Germany, in Spain, in France, in Italy are paying ticket holders. All of them are paying ticket holders. There's not 10,000 free tickets being given out in Serie A or Premier League or Bundesliga.
Yeah.
So you see my point. It's like.
So you mentioned the whole East Bengal and Mohun Bagan being run by very unprofessional managements, and me being a Mohun Bagan fan, have seen that all my life. That's just been the plague of the club, and the fans will raise some voice against the management from time to time, but then we'll win a trophy, and then everybody will forgive the management because, hey, we beat East Bengal or we got a trophy, and everybody was happy with that status quo as long as we got a trophy from time to time. Is that a typical behavior of a fan base, you would say, or is this like something that would not happen for Newcastle or some other fan bases that you know?
It's typical of a fan base going back 40 years. That's exactly what happened to Newcastle, decades and decades ago. It was this constant backwards and forwards between sort of a little bit of success and a star player, then almost bankruptcy, so they have to sell their star player. That's what's happened to football clubs for a long, long period of time. But what's happened in the last 20 years is football has become more sustainable and more professional. Yeah. So Mohun Bagan and all of that, it's like, we get some good sponsorship in, we blow all the money, and then we're in trouble, and then we start the whole cycle again. We can't afford the star striker until we've got some more money in. Then when we get some more money in, we get the star striker and we do well and the fans are happy. It's this never-ending cycle. What you're trying to create is a sustainable platform for the future that, you might not win everything, but, the club is not almost going out of business every season.
And that's been...
all the bullshit that was going on with East Bengal a year ago.
Yeah, it's still going on, by the way.
It's still going on.
Yeah, and one of the factors you just mentioned, why would a big investor put money into East Bengal and Mohun Bagan? I think if you have followed the Shree Cement deal with East Bengal, the announcement was made by the Chief Minister of West Bengal at her office, with the representatives of East Bengal and the investors. So when a politician is announcing the deal, you can sort of imagine what is the incentive behind these big investors to put money into East Bengal and Mohun Bagan. And by the way, it wasn't very far away from an election. So these things happen. Politics sort of moves the needle. East Bengal and Mohun Bagan in the elections a little bit move the needle, and it becomes a really good platform for politicians to be associated with the club, be well wishers of the club, and gain a little clout of that. It's good for the clubs and it's good for these companies as well. If you put money into them, you get good access to these politicians. And in India, if you have access to politicians, how easier it becomes to do business. So it's a bit of a clusterfuck in my head, but we've just grown up with it, so it's just become normalized for us. Is this something you see around the world? Is this like a healthy situation to be in, this closeness between politics and football? Hardly any
No.
separation.
Well, it's actually banned by FIFA, isn't it? Governments are not
Yeah.
allowed to make decisions, influence decisions in football. Otherwise, FIFA can sanction an actual country and remove their ability to take part in FIFA tournaments. We've seen it before. So, but they don't always make sure that that rule is enacted. Sometimes it can be a little bit loose on depending who it is. So yes, I've seen it, and yes, it goes on around the world. But your question is a very valid one. My answer would be simple and say, why should India be judging itself amongst the worst examples of football organization and management in the world? Surely they're better than that. The places in the world where there's this kind of corruption and disorganization are impoverished countries that do not have the resources that India has, do not have the money that India has, and in some cases don't have the football passion that India has. So why should India be comparing itself with the worst examples of football mismanagement in the world? Which comes back to what I was saying about the progress of Indian football. Indian football the powers that be in Indian football keep giving themselves credit for making progress. My answer always to that is you are not making progress fast enough.
Yeah.
So sort your shit out. Instead of giving yourself credit, you should be looking at every single meeting that you're in, whether it's held every month or every quarter or whenever. I don't know when they hold their meetings. They should be saying, how can we speed up this process? How can we reduce the number of foreigners quicker? How can we increase the number of matches played over the course of a season quicker? How can we get more teams into the league quicker? How can we help the national team move up the rankings quicker? How can we build more academies quicker? Instead of sitting on bloody decisions for months and months and months, and actually forget that, sitting on decisions for years.
But do you think last couple of years it's become a little bit better in terms of the pace of development that they're trying to pick up?
No.
I mean, just before the pandemic.
No. We'll take the pandemic out of it because of obvious reasons, but no. Now, ask me this question in a year, I might have an answer for you to see what happens between now and next season. I might be able to judge it better to see whether they picked up the pace of progress in Indian professional football.
In 2019, we had a Durand Cup happening in Calcutta. That was a little bit, a bit of an optimistic situation that I thought, because it was actually being marketed well, broadcast well, and the ISL clubs were taking a little bit of interest. Not perfect because some were sending second teams, but at least you start to see this pattern of what it was with ISL clubs and other people associated with ISL, is that ISL is the beginning and end of everything. Now they're playing in Super Cup. They're taking a little bit of interest in Durand Cup. Everybody's playing in state leagues, developmental teams. We've got a few clubs interested in women's football. So a little bit of positive. I mean, are you seeing any of that? I'm just trying to get a little bit of positivity out of the whole thing.
Oh, look, there's lots of positives, but why are they doing that? They're doing that because they realized exactly what I said half a decade ago, which was players are not getting enough game time.
Yeah.
That's why they're entering all of these competitions, because you've got young talent coming through who need competitive matches. They can't just sit around and wait for their 18 regular season games or 21 season minutes in a 21 game season league.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And do you think hosting high-profile tournaments are helpful in that regard? Under-17 World Cup, Women's Asian Cup.
It's not a bad thing that the whole host the Under-17 World Cup. It's a good thing. Anyone who says it's a bad thing is talking nonsense. But all that I see through this bullshit because I've been involved not only in football as a broadcaster, but I used to work for Newcastle United in the English Premier League. So I've seen it from a business and an organizational perspective as well. I can see through the bullshit. You see what I'm saying? They are doing it because it makes them feel great, yeah, about this big achievement of we are hosting a FIFA World Cup. That's for under 17s, you know, don't shout about that. And it gives them big credit points with FIFA for one day hosting the World Cup, which is never going to happen in my lifetime. So, you know, that's why they're doing it. It's for ulterior motives. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
But is it a bad thing? No, of course it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Yeah. So you know,
so what I'm trying to say to you is make sure you give them credit. Yeah, the AIFF and Praful Patel and others. Make sure you give them credit for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons.
Mm.
Yeah. Does it raise the exposure within India to youth football by hosting the Under-17 World Cup? And I think they've got the Women's World Cup. Is that right? Or the Women's
Under-17 Women's World Cup is coming up
the
next year.
Under-17 Women's World Cup. So does this all raise the profile? Yes, absolutely it does. And is that a good thing? Yes, absolutely it is. But just make sure that that credit goes because of, you know, that tournament and raising the profile within India. Do you think that this is going to get us the hosting of the World Cup 20 years from now? Oh, you're in fantasy land.
Mm. That's true. So you're looking at, looking at a lot of top-down investment and a lot of boosted doses and a lot of push. And what's falling short? I mean, we are looking at the ISL format getting better. I-League clubs, one of the big things that has sort of gone under the radar is that not a single I-League club has closed down since 2019. You know, I think given the amount of club that we had in the last few years, this is actually, you know, it's not a breaking news per se, but it's a big deal in my head at least. What do you think, you know, despite all these investments and all these other hosting big tournaments, we're falling short other than, you know, just the length of the league? What's missing?
Well, you've kind of answered your own question. The amount of competitive game time. Okay. So if I go and play one game per year, yeah, I am learning and experiencing 90 minutes of competitive football. Okay. I'm going to make mistakes in that. I'm going to learn lessons in that. But that's from 90 minutes of competitive football. If I play 2 games a week, my speed of learning those lessons increases phenomenally.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
True. Yeah.
So to come back to the original point, it's that learning curve has got to be, and this is audio, so I can't show you with my hand or with a graph or with some.
I can see you actually.
So that learning curve needs to be made much steeper. You see what I'm saying? It's like that. I'm linking this back. I'm just keep coming back to the same thing: the speed of progress. Yeah.
True.
Is it a great idea that they're playing 3 games, which they do in Scotland, by the way? I don't know if they still do it in Scotland, but certainly they did it, and they do it in some other small Scandinavian leagues where they play home and away.
Australia
and away.
3 legs, right?
Yeah, 3 games per season, and then the next season it's home and away and home. So is that a great thing? Yes, absolutely. Should it have been done 5 years ago? Of course it bloody should have. I mean, this is not rocket. You know these things that they're coming up with now over the last couple of seasons and now, and it's not rocket science, but they're not doing anything new or clever, not doing anything groundbreaking. They're just so bloody slow at it because, you know, they've got to have a meeting and then they've got to have a meeting about the meeting, and then they've got to sit down next month and have a meeting about the meeting about the meeting, and then you're getting, you know, you must have seen these comedy shows and these sketch shows, Chiranjit, that, you know, where it's like the minutes of the last meeting is the 55 minutes of the hour meeting.
Yeah. I think so.
By the time we've all had a cup of chai and some cake and everything and gone through the minutes of the last meeting, someone goes, right, that's it, the meeting's over. That's the picture I have in my mind when the AIFF get together, you know?
True. So on a lighter note, moving on to some more lighter subject, which is I'm sure you've been following what's been happening at East Bengal and Mohun Bagan, and I just want to bring Newcastle United into it. Your club just got acquired by a big investor. So have they decided to change the name in any way?
Not that I'm aware of. I think it's still going to be Newcastle United. What you will see, though...
Have they decided to change the logo in any way?
No, I don't think they'll do that.
That must be nice. That must feel really nice.
I know what you're referring to here. You're referring to ATK, aren't you? ATK Mohun Bagan. Look, that was a dumb thing to do. You know more of the detail than I do. It's a dumb thing to do because Mohun Bagan is such a legacy club that you've got to be very, very careful that you don't remove anything of that. Yeah, whilst at the same time moving forward into the modern professional football era. If they said, right, okay, we can't play at the Salt Lake Stadium anymore because the stadium's too old and it's crumbling, or the Maidan is not suitable for 20,000 fans every week, then you have to move with the times and say, right, we've got to move our location or our stadium somewhere else to another patch of ground, maybe a new patch of ground with a new development. You have to move with that. You can't always say the stadium has to be in this spot because it's been there for 100 years. That's happened to Arsenal, it's happened to Tottenham. That's called moving with the times. But destroying the legacy, you have to be very careful what you're doing with that. Yeah? There's a big difference. There's a big difference, Shirijit, between changing the font of the lettering or slightly changing the shade of the colors, in the logo or the shirts or whatever. That's one thing. That's just modernizing and making progress and all the rest of it. You're walking on thin ice if you start destroying legacy elements of the club. And the ATK Mohun Bagan thing, the ATK was just nonsensical. As soon as it happened, I just went, oh my God, who the fuck made this decision?
I'll tell you one story that happened with the Mohun Bagan fans, a couple of groups that are based in North America. What they were planning to do was to start this tradition of screening derbies and other big ISL games. So it's a 7:30 a.m. kickoff in the East Coast of US and Canada. So what they did was they were talking to some chain restaurants, breakfast restaurants and other stuff and pubs. So they were striking a deal with this restaurant chain that has branches in US and Canada that was going to show the Mohun Bagan matches on 5 locations, 5 big cities, and it was going to become a Friday morning or Sunday morning breakfast session. And it was going to be a gathering place for the Indian community. They were also going to invite fans of other clubs and everything. All of that was in place, and the first one was going to be the first derby between ATK Mohun Bagan and SC East Bengal now in ISL. But it turns out that ESPN Plus, which is the broadcaster of ISL in America, the league package that was sent out to them only identified the team as ATK. And the regional manager of the chain called up this guy saying, I can't find Mohun Bagan anywhere on the fixtures. What's up with that? He tried to explain the whole situation to him, but he said that since you are putting out, advertisement and flyers and other social media posts with our logo, you have to follow the ESPN Plus fixture. And that means they would have to print, flyers that says SC East Bengal versus ATK, which of course was not acceptable to them. So they scrapped the whole thing, which means Indian Super League lost out on the biggest organic multi-city screening, completely organized by fans, probably in Indian football history.
Great PR as well for the Super League.
Yeah.
Great PR. In America, which is a tough nut to crack when it comes to broadcasting.
Yeah. So that's gone now. Now every single one of those fans are boycotting the team. They don't even support this team anymore because they think like it's attacking the identity of the club and denying its history and all of that. Maybe I'm just venting, but how does this happen? And as a fan base, that's just finding itself shut out from the club that it has loved all its life, basically. It's a 132-year-old fan base. How I don't know. Can you contextualize the absurdity of this nonsensical existential drama that's happening here?
Well, first of all, any merger has to be well thought through. And I'm actually against mergers. I really am. I think it's better and easier to go and get a new owner of ATK or new investment for ATK and to get new investment for Mohun Bagan. I don't know all of the details. You know more detail than I do. I have a feeling that ATK as a brand was floundering, as a franchise was floundering, and here is a way to re-energize that. Which is just a stupid way to rescue the ATK franchise. But anyway, again, look, whenever I meet young people, especially those who are in their 20s or who are studying at university or whatever, I keep saying to them, I need you. I really need you. Why? Because I hope that you're not going to go on and become professional football players, but you might go on into the business of sports business, and the football business of sport. So I need you because when you become in your 30s, you become in your 40s, and certainly when you're in your 50s, you have more power over budgets. And I need you to put those budgets and those resources into football and not into cricket, because that generation at the moment that are in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, whenever a marketing opportunity or a sponsorship opportunity comes up, they go with their first love, and their first love is cricket. I understand that. But they will get older, and the next generations are coming through. So I need as many people as possible to get into the sports business. Why is this important? Because it connects to exactly what we're talking about now. Anyone who understands football business would not make a dumb decision like has been made with the ATK Mohun Bagan merger. No one, not one person who has even 5% understanding of football business would make that kind of dumb decision.
So, there are certain rumors going around. I don't know if you have kept up with the grapevines. Some are saying certain stakeholders of this ATK Mohun Bagan franchisee are going to split off and they're going to restart ATKFC separately, and Sanjeev Goenka is going to take over and carry on as Mohun Bagan. If that happens, there's no certainty to it. This is completely unverified rumor at this point. That's a best possible outcome in your books?
Yes, of course, because we don't want any less football clubs. We were trying to increase the size of the league. So I don't want ATK to go out of business. Yeah, I mean, what you've done is, you know what I said earlier, that the most important thing is to increase the number of participants in the league. Why? Because that then increases the number of games. And what increases the number of games? The number of competitive minutes. What increases the number of competitive minutes? The number of players who can play the number of competitive minutes, which enhances the experience and ability of the Indian players. Right, and I'll come back to that in a second. So all you've done is you've got rid of one franchisee, ATK, because you've merged it into another new franchisee. So the league has not gained a new club. You've lost one and gained another. So you're still where you were before. How stupid is that? So if Reliance and IMG, and understand that IMG are now pretty much out of it, if they are trying to expand the league and to enhance this product, surely behind the scenes you should be working to keep ATK and to bring Mohun Bagan into the Super League, and others as well, not just Mohun Bagan. You understand?
Yeah, but there were certain concerns that ISL, since it wants to branch out to as many states as possible, some people within FSDL were skeptical of the idea of having 3 clubs from Calcutta. They
There's
wanted it.
nothing wrong with that. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with having 3 clubs? But look, let's just stop a second and assume for 1 minute that that's a problem. Right, so you've got all of these problems in developing professional football and the product in India. Where do you think having 3 clubs in one city is a problem and ranks, and not having enough teams in general in the league? Which do you think, I'll ask you the question, which do you think is a more important problem to deal with right now as in season 8 of the Indian Super League? The amount of clubs, or having too many clubs in one city? What do you think is a bigger problem?
We need more clubs.
Correct.
That's something we have agreed on from day one. But we have to remember that ISL had a one city, one club policy for the first
Another
5
stupid
years.
policy made up by someone who doesn't understand the business of football.
Well, it's directly taken from IPL.
Correct.
It mimics that.
And when is anyone involved in this going to understand what works for IPL does not necessarily work for the ISL?
That's true.
Thank God they got rid of the auctions and all of that bullshit.
So we had that, and that was one of the issues that they were talking about. And I think there's still, because we still have a franchise system in place and it's going to be there for the next few years, but there is still some hangover of that old system where they prefer to have, if we're going to have a new club, it should be in a new part of the country. It should bring in a new fan base from a new state, rather than having.
Right. My response to that is, first of all, go with your easy wins. As the saying goes, pick the low-hanging fruit first. So go into like the Northeast states, for example, and get 3 or 4 clubs from that state, build up your league, okay? And then after that, you can start to say, right, we're not going to allow any more franchisees from this city or from this state. We're going to limit it now. Yeah? That's the way I would do it. By the way, these things are, I'm answering questions that I answered 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I could see this coming down the line. Now, coming back to the Indian national team, because I'm going to have to go shortly, but coming back to the Indian national team, they are now suffering from the policies that have been put in place in the league. Why? You saw the games recently, the under-23 tournament. I'm guessing you watched them, yeah? I didn't watch any of the games, but I watched the highlights. And it doesn't matter whether it's the under-23s or whether it's the national team. There is one fundamental problem with the national team at the moment. What is that? From all of the matches that we've seen this year, last year, whenever, what is the problem that they have?
The striking department is
correct.
Not at all.
They cannot score goals. Now, tell me how that problem is linked to the format of the Indian Super League. It is linked to the format of the Indian Super League because whenever you put foreigners into a team, a manager who is immediately under pressure, right, is going to put his best players, i.e. the foreigners, through the spine of the team, a centre-back, a central midfielder, and a striker. Now, up front in football teams, you have 1, sometimes 2 strikers. In the midfield, you have 3, 4 players, and in defence, you have 4 players. So out of the 4 players in defence, you're only losing 1 spot that could be for an Indian player. In midfield, out of the 4 midfielders, you're only losing 1 spot for what could be an Indian player. But out of the strikers, if you're playing 1 up front, the Indian player doesn't get a chance to get game time. Or if they're playing 2 up front, he's battling alongside the star foreigner. And as Sunil Chhetri comes towards the twilight of his career, they are suffering now because of a policy that was put in place in season 1, i.e. 7 foreigners in season 1 or 8 foreigners in season 1?
That's true.
So can you imagine if in season 1 they'd followed AFC rules, 3+1, foreign players in season 1, where do you think we would be now in terms of the striking issue?
In a much better place. I think season
Correct.
1 was 11 players. Season 2, 3, they reduced it to 10 foreign players per squad, 6 on the field. I think 2017 onwards, it was 5 on the field, 8 foreign players total. Now it's going to be 4 plus 2, which is, but the striking department specifically, every club is still going to get 2 foreign strikers, whether it's I-League club or ISL club. Any club that can purchase 2 foreign players will try to secure the goals coming from them. So
no, not necessarily. That's not how managers think. And I can only speak on behalf of the foreign coaches. I can't speak on behalf of Indian coaches, Indian managers. But no, that's not how they think. The thing that every manager thinks about is a spine of a team. So let's, for example, just assume that you're only allowed 2 foreigners in your team. You're going to have one somewhere in either the middle or the defense, and one up front. Yeah.
Okay.
So what's been happening is any young potential talent, striking talent, is being forced to play out wide, either the right or left of a 3 or on the wings. How are you going to develop a young striking talent and getting game time, valuable game time and valuable minutes as a striker if every match that they come on the field to play, they're playing on the wing? It's not their position. True. And now people are asking the question and saying India, because by the way, the Indian defense is getting stronger every year from what I'm seeing. The Indian midfield options are getting stronger every year, but the striking options, I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see the next Sunil Chetri coming through. I mean, Bipin Singh has been pretty impressive, but again, needs game time. Constant game time. And when I say game time, I'm not talking about being in the first team. I'm talking about 18 or 21 if you go to the final. Games a season is just not enough.
So it all comes down to that central problem that we have is this ISL centricism and the ISL not being large enough to accommodate a big enough supply line that the Indian national team needs to take the national team forward. So, so one of the things that we discussed earlier was like having 3 legs would increase the number of matches. One of the things that immediately it was sort of a lizard brain reaction for me was that, oh, they're going to increase the number of matches by increasing the legs, then they're not going to take in more teams. So you see, because of the way ISL have been there in the past, and I have had conversations with some of them. And,
okay. So, which by the way is fine as a short-term fix, because you can't just go, it's logistically and certainly from a business perspective with regards to the ISL itself, it's impossible to go from 11 teams to 20 teams next season. It's just never going to happen. It's going to take time. Yeah. So if that fixes things in the short term, i.e. increasing the number of games, then great. I'm all for that. It's a positive step. I applaud that. And then when you do have 20 teams in your top tier, then you can go back to just home and away.
True. But, there is, just to put the other perspective for you, which does not really come out in the often that much, because this is mostly what people talk about in a hush-hush manner behind the scenes, is that they are looking at the ISL in terms of how much TV viewership it generates. Like it's sort of as a product, they see it as competing with a movie in a multiplex, or the TV serials, because it's not weekend games, right? It's 7:30 p.m. every night. That's what they want to instill. They want there to be matches every night, and they want it to be a ritual viewing, as Indian TV serials are for most of these entertainment channels. So it's basically packaged to go up against, to play into that entertainment channel habit that we have in Indian viewers. So they are looking at the ISL as something that feeds off of the initial push of promotions that happen in the month leading up to the first match of the season. And that hype carries it for some time. And they often see the viewership in the case of certain clubs maybe drop off towards the middle of the season. And then they start thinking, okay, maybe the season is too long and we cannot carry the hype for the entire season. So we need to have a shorter season to maximize the per match viewership and capitalize on the on the revenue from the sponsorship and the ads. So when you are looking at
Carry on.
So so you are looking at a philosophy that's running directly counter to the footballing philosophy that we have, which is we need a bigger league, we need a longer league. Here, a longer league is directly going against the commercial interest that's coming behind the philosophy of the league as a product. How do you bridge these two interests?
So the fundamental flaw in that thinking is chasing traditional linear TV viewership. Linear TV all around the world is dying. Yeah, everything is going OTT. Yeah. So first of all, you've based your entire model on traditional TV viewership, which amongst the young generations in particular, India has a strong viewership, certainly amongst the older generations. I'm talking about traditional TV here. But amongst the young generation, more and more of the young generation are now accessing a second device. What does that mean? It means that in the household, they don't have to watch anymore what mum and dad say they watch. They can go through to their bedroom with their tablet or their phone. Mostly it's phones. That's what we found at Facebook. And watch it and watch other content on their mobile phones. Now, their mobile phone is not linear TV. So why are you chasing linear TV? Start building a model that is geared up for the next 50 years, not for the way sport has been broadcast over the last 50 years. Yeah? And
True.
Build it organically that way. And you can go on your own app. You know, that's the way I'd be thinking. I'd be thinking, I want the Indian Super League direct to consumer, DTC as it's called, on a mobile phone within 10 years. So you either pay a subscription to get the league, or you pay-per-view if that's the way they want to do it. It's entirely up to them. There's pros and cons for both models. So, and you build that organically.
You know, as you said, it's that situation that we are facing, that some of these antiquated thinking about how TV broadcast and presentation of a league to the consumer happens.
Let me stop you there. Anyone that is mentioning the phrase TV broadcast in these meetings does not understand where the industry is going in the next decade. So what's happening is we had data for it, and I've got data in my drawer for it. There are certain sports that you would call minor niche sports around the world that are exploding in viewership because they're being delivered in a completely different way. You understand?
Yeah.
So that's where they should be thinking. They should be thinking as a startup, as a niche sport, and saying, how can we get to this young generation, these young fans? And hey, by the way, let's just get the elephant out of the room first. The viewership numbers, I do not believe one viewership number that's put in front of me about Indian TV. It's all bullshit. It's bullshit.
Yeah, agree.
All of these numbers that come out, the what is it called? The
Try ratings.
Yeah, they're all an absolute scam. I laughed when, was it last year, that guy that was caught going around and paying all of the people to leave the channel on all day? Was it last year that scandal came out? I mean, there's usually a scandal like that every 4 or 5 years in Indian TV. So do not come to me about Indian TV ratings. I don't believe one of them. They're all bullshit. So the thing about going down the data route, i.e. OTT, and going via mobile phones, is that you have exact data that cannot be manipulated by some guy going around the TV viewers who are part of the system and giving them, a few thousand rupees to make sure they stay on this channel. And build it from there. Because if you're authentic, and you and I talked about the word authentic off air before we started this conversation, if you're authentic and you're believable and you dial into the passion of that young generation, they will go with you and they will stay with you and they will be loyal to the end, and they will buy your products.
That's true. One of the dichotomies that I-League was facing in the lead up to the uh, starting of ISL was that so much of its fan base was in states that the try ratings did not take into account, because you know how culturally different the northeastern states are, how it is in Kashmir. It's not a huge advertising destination for the big brands, right? So the try ratings don't really give it too much of a weightage. The Hindi belt gets more weightage, a little bit to Kerala, a little bit to West Bengal. But all these fans who were tuning in from Mizoram, from Meghalaya to watch their clubs play, hardly any reflection in the ratings. Because to
Mm-hmm.
the traditional advertisers, they did not matter.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that has changed with OTT, because I-League would have been in a better shape, because they would be getting lots of numbers from Kashmir, from Mizoram, from Manipur, these states which it was a viewership,
Yeah,
if you know
you're
what I
absolutely
mean.
right. Mm.
So but what you said about the niche, the Indian Super League being a niche, is something I want to focus on. I mean, we've seen the UFC deal that happened with ESPN Plus, but they can, because traditionally it's a sport that has always had the pay-per-view structure, and they're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
Indian Super League is, I think they establishes established it as something that is supposed to have a mass appeal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And football usually is not a pay-per-view or a closed circuit oriented sport. It almost always has a mass appeal, at least in the
Mm-hmm.
successful countries. So framing it as a niche sport, and putting it behind a paywall in the initial days, before it has reached a certain amount of popularity, does that work? Because I look at India, I
No,
look at it as an unrealized market completely.
no,
We're
not
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 in
in the initial
10%.
period. And if you go back and study the history of the UFC, the biggest challenge they had before they exploded as a sports product, which is now mainstream. You have to say UFC is mainstream now.
Yeah.
But in 2000, prior to 2000, in the 1990s, they couldn't get mainstream availability. And there was a number of reasons for that. But by doing the ESPN deal, they got onto mainstream availability. So no, absolutely not. I wouldn't put it behind a paywall. I would make it registration, but not subscription in the early days. Then as it gains popularity, can you imagine if a little Leo Messi from one far-flung corner of India becomes the star of the show in Indian football? So you see I mean, we follow each other on social media, so you know where my thinking comes from all the time. The players always come first, and they keep forgetting this. We've had a conversation tonight about the brands of clubs, about the ISL and the difference ISL and I-League. Forget all of that. The players drive the viewership.
Yeah.
When they see when Sunil Chetri's on the field of play, he gets more interest than, for example, another player, another striker. So, and it's who's the next Sunil Chetri, and is the next Sunil Chetri even better than the last Sunil Chetri? Is there a little Leo Messi that's going to come on the field and just light the world up? There will be. It'll come. It'll come. It might come next year. It might come 10 years from now. So once you get into that, then everyone wants to watch them. Yeah, I started getting into the UFC when Conor McGregor came along, right? So
I beat you there. I beat you there. I got in with Brock Lesnar.
Right. So you see what I'm saying? It's sort of like, first of all, you've got to be on mainstream media. You've got to have as much exposure, and it's got to be easy to get into, and it's got to be free. And then after that, then you can start to say, right, okay, we either go for full subscription or we go for pay-per-view. So when Mohun Bagan are playing East Bengal, that's you got to pay for that. But for the other games, it's free. Or when one of the other derbies, the South India derby, like you might say, right, okay, Chennai playing Kerala or Bengaluru or something like that. Those are pay-per-view. So how you do that and when you do it, more importantly, is a different conversation for another day. It's we're a long way away from that at the moment.
Okay, one last question I'm gonna put to you, I guess, just to end on a lighter note. I think when people talk about the best experience that you've had while commentating and broadcasting in India, you always mention the East Bengal and Mohun Bagan game at Salt Lake
Oh,
Stadium. Yeah, and
oh.
the power cut that happened, and the atmospheric broadcast that happened, we are sort of losing that. There is a debate going on in terms of stadium safety, and in terms of how many people should be allowed. Back then it was 120, 130,000 people. It could be more. No one was keeping count. Everybody was getting in. Now there's a lock on about 65,000, something like that. And that's because it doesn't have enough gates, and because it's hosting World Cups and everything, they have to follow a certain protocol. uh, Now that we are seeing, some of the wildness of old English football come back with standing only, spaces in certain English Premier League stadiums. What do you think? Should India take a step back and not try to be way too cultured about what they're presenting in the stadium, and let especially in Calcutta, the fans are known to be wild. Let them be wild. Have open spaces. Let them overflow the stadium a little bit.
Mhm.
Is that something do you think they should consider?
Yes, you should be making. There's nothing wrong with making progress, and there's nothing wrong with moving forward, and there's nothing wrong with, especially improving stadium safety. My point is, you don't have to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour overnight. If anyone in India is thinking about building, anyone, I know that FC Goa have got plans to maybe build a new stadium. You see, the biggest problem you have with a lot of the stadia in India is it's state owned. It's not owned by the clubs. So again, another form of revenue that they can't capitalize on because they don't own the land, they don't own the stadium. They have to pay the local state to use that facility. So therefore, why should they invest in the stadium? You've got the state who are saying like, we're just going to give it a new lick of paint every year. And then you've got the clubs saying, but we want a club shop and we want more food and beverage outlets so that we can make money off food and beverage, and we want to have, sell shirts, etc., etc. So the clubs are going like, why should we invest in your asset? you know so
True.
but it's about walking before you can run. Any clubs that's talking about building a 30, 40, 50,000 seater stadium is you're in fantasy land. You should be building a stadium that's in the sort of 10 to 15,000 mark, but has the capacity to increase that size, so increase the footprint if necessary 5 years, 10 years from now, so that what you're getting is a great atmosphere. Because you mentioned at the beginning of that question about me being at the Salt Lake Stadium. I always say it ranks in my top 3 broadcast experiences in my entire career. And the reason is the atmosphere. So, by the way, I've been to stadia where it's a 100,000 seater stadium and there's only 5,000 in it or 10,000 in it. It feels empty. So it's not about the size of the stadia, it's about the crowd. It's about capacity crowds in those stadiums and making sure they're right next to the pitch, which is another problem, excuse me, with state-owned stadia. They have to be a jack of all trades. They have to have athletics facilities and the running tracks and the sand pit for the long jump and whatever else that they're doing on that field. Whereas if you make football only stadia, not only do you give the fans a home, yeah, permanent home. I don't know if you've ever been to the San Siro. The San Siro is soulless because it's owned by the government and it's shared between Inter Milan and AC Milan, which is why they've always wanted to build their own stadium, but they've never been in a position to afford it, not in the last decade or so. So, but it gives the fans that home, that identity. St James's Park is Mecca for Newcastle United fans. It's where you congregate, and then you've got all of that money-making potential in and around the stadium complex, whether it's food and beverage outlets, whether it's club shops, drinks outlets, bars, etc. You see what I'm saying?
There you have it. We could not get to every single topic that I wanted to talk to him about, and hopefully, I get a chance to talk to him again and cover those bases. Meanwhile, you should go to Twitter and follow him on @JoeFooty, and also keep an eye on @TFG Football for all the news and updates on the Indian Super League, the upcoming I League, IFA Shield, and whatever else Indian football sends our way, except futsal, because we don't talk about that. Thank you for listening. We'll be back very soon with our new episode. Take care till then.